You want to start now or wait?
Let's do it just about 1 minute earlier.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you all for coming on the last day. This is the work by Yuhan Hu, and Fei Wang, who is a co-author, is also in the audience. As you can see, both Yuhan and Fei Wang are Chinese, and the conference is in China, so obviously the Indian guy gives the talk. Right. Before I go forward, I should also thank my sponsors, ONR and Google. Google in particular deserves award for timeliness, because they just sent me a mail yesterday saying we got a Google research grant for this particular work. So thanks, Google. I guess absence also makes heart grow fonder, because we haven't been able to use Gmail every day, so I'm feeling homesick for Gmail. Anyway, so I also want to apologize for the fact that there was a poster session for this paper yesterday. For some reason, they expected that you'll all have hard questions before even hearing the talk. I unfortunately was not, my co-authors could not be present, and I had some important an appointment with a bunch of my Chinese friends, so I couldn't be there either. However, I and Fei are going to be here, and after the talk, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask us either after the talk or during the rest of the day. Okay, coming back again, we are going to be talking about listening to the crowd, automated analysis of events, sentiment analysis of events. Let me give you a feel for what the problem is. Of course, you're all the Twitter generation, and basically whenever there is like a public event going on, there is a lot of chatter on the Twitter, and in fact, what's called journalism has been reduced to essentially looking at the tweets of what people are saying and then writing it in New York Times front page. So our hope is that maybe we should just get rid of that manual intervention so that we can have computers doing journalism. Now, of course, people are all talking about the debate, they're all tweeting, and the question is, of course, which parts of the debate seem to have gotten the most positive versus negative response, which topics of the various, that were covered in the debate got the positive versus negative responses and so on. By the way, I noticed that I'm talking without mic. I assume that you can all hear me because I'm quite loud. Okay, now the way we do this is that we have we'll assume that we have a transcript of the event available. I mean, we could also do automatic speech recognition, but that's too ambitious for now. So we'll assume that there is an automated transcript available, especially for public and popular events. The transcripts are quite easily available, and so then I want to be able to see which parts of this particular transcript are getting positive comments, which are getting negative comments, so that then we can replace New York Times. Okay, that's what we are trying to do. Okay, so what are the sentiments elicited by the various segments of the overall transcript, overall event, and what are the sentiments elicited by the topics? The idea, of course, is that the segment itself might be made up of various topics. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. Now, obviously, I don't think I need to convince you that there are applications for this, but if I do need to, then there is applications. You can do event playback, you can do analysis, you can do computational advertisements. I mean, in this particular case, I guess we are doing political event, but you could also do this for you remember the Samsung had this great opening event that they wanted to do just like Apple, and it was a huge bust. And it was a bust as it was going on because they were being sexist, they were being all sorts of things, and people were tweeting away. And you can actually figure this out, and Samsung people could be told that you have to stop doing this, right as it was going on. So even computational advertisements and so on can be quite helped by this sort of analysis. Okay, so the question then again, to pose it again, is given an event's transcript and its associated tweets, Again, where do you get the tweets? One of the nice things, of course, is for public events, there are a priori advertised hashtags, but there are other ways of getting, even if you are interested. Okay, but we'll assume right now that there is the pre-decided hashtags are being used for the tweets, and so you know the tweets, then you want to sort of analyze which segments are positively being responded to, which segments are being negatively being responded to, and what topics are getting positive and negative responses. So that's what we're trying to do. Okay. So now, how do you do this? The basic, I kept using the words like segment. So presumably what I have in mind and what I'm trying to paint in your head is that this transcript somehow got split into these segments, these blue segments. Okay? And then you somehow, somebody, maybe your rich uncle, told you which tweets are about which segments. Okay? And then once I do that, then of course it's just arithmetic. You just count how many positive. Now, of course, on top of that, of course, you need to do sentiment analysis on the tweets, which is also sort of a reasonably well-studied problem. Okay, so then of course, then you count, you do your arithmetic, and you get to be New York Times. Okay, now of course, as I said here, there are several open issues. The question is, who is putting these segments? Okay, I mean, basically we are currently paying journalists because journalists are using their heads by looking at the tweets, looking at the transcript, their understanding of the transcript, to realize that, oh, these tweets are about this first part of the debate, these are about the second part of the debate, these are the overall debate, these are about the overall debate itself. So this is the kind of human judgment that we are paying the journalists for. Actually, journalists are nice people, I hope they keep their jobs, but that part of their drudgery should be removed. Okay, so that they can do more interesting stuff. Okay, so the question, of course, again is how do you do the segmentation? Can you do it automatically? How do you do alignment of tweets to the segments? That is also hard, right? Because this is not like the segments have hashtags, but there is no obvious structured way of connecting tweets to the pieces of the segment. Okay, and then finally, then once after that, when you do the sentiment analysis, and then you can do your the counting part. Okay, so here is a possible approach. It's a straw man approach. I'm going to put this up and then basically break it and say it won't work, and then I'll give you our much more interesting approach. Okay, so first you could manually label tweets. Okay, that's basically what people are doing. If we read a tweet, we can tell whether it's positive or negative. Okay, we have a brain. And then you can use some sort of an off-the-shelf sentiment classifiers to probably improve the sentiment analysis. So you may, label a huge number of tweets, a reasonable number of tweets, and then you can use that supervision to improve your classification of the remaining tweets. And then somehow you have to segment the transcript and then connect these tweets to the segments. That's an open issue. Okay, now of course even that can be done manually. When you do it, when you actually say, oh, that particular topic got pretty bad reviews, you're using basically all your understanding of how language works. Okay, so can we do without all that? Okay. Now, of course, can we do this? It's not easy to do because the way we are setting it up here, first of all, there is a supervision problem. How many tweets have to be manually annotated before you can get a reasonable amount of accuracy? And then the second, there is this whole entire issue of aligning tweets to segments, which is actually a two-part issue. Where are the segments and how do you align the tweets to the segments? Those two are jointly have to be handled. Okay. So, so these are basically the challenges. As I said, there's the supervision challenge and there is also the alignment challenge. Okay. So I want to tell you what we wind up doing. Okay. And then it's obviously a sort of remember that there are several challenges here. You need to think about how to do the segmentation, how to do the alignment, and then of course also how to do the sentiment analysis. Okay. So what we do, roughly speaking, and then I'll keep fleshing it out before Boy asks me to stop talking, that basically you would start with essentially an automated way of jointly segmenting and aligning, jointly segmenting a topic, a transcript, and aligning tweets to it. This particular part is a pretty hard topic. thankfully, we have done this work last year and we presented it in IICAI 2012 as well as ICWSM 2012. I will give you a little background on that, and that actually becomes a sort of a background prior knowledge for what we'll do in this work. Okay. Then we'll also get a small amount of supervision for tweets, and then also use sentiment lexicon which talk about terms and their polarity, and combine these to provide the full framework. Now, the full framework turns out to be, like my previous speaker, it's a matrix factorization framework. Notice that I don't have any formulas here, they'll come soon enough. But let's first look at the matrices. Okay, so what I want to do is I have essentially tweets and terms. Okay, I somehow want to split it into 4 matrices, factorize it into 4 matrices. A tweet segment, segment topic, topic sentiment, and term sentiment transpose. Now, you can do the math and see that it will be essentially again the tweet terms matrix. Okay, the magic of course is how to get you these 4 matrices. And in getting these 4 matrices, of course, factorization has been, there's lots of interesting techniques being done in matrix factorization. This is a hard enough factorization problem, but more interesting part is if you just look for any old 4 matrix factorization of this type, it may not be, it's basically a very ill-posed problem. Okay, so you need some sort of a prior guidance on how the tweet segment matrix is set up, how the segment topic matrix is set up, how topic sentiment is set up, how term sentiment is set up. And then you start from there, initialization, and then start doing your actual matrix factorization. Okay, now that basically is where the prior work that we have done comes into the play. So we require that the factors represent the prior knowledge that we have to the extent possible. What's interesting is most of this prior knowledge, we go out of our way to keep it automated. That's what you'll see. In fact, the biggest prior knowledge, which is this event and the tweet event alignment, which involves automated segmentation, that is automated by our work from last year. Okay. Anyway, so let me show you that of these 4 matrices, this particular matrix, the prior regularization comes from ETLDA, which I'll be talking about in a bit. But again, as I said, we did this last year. And then for the term sentiment, this is a fairly easy idea. This one we just use essentially word polarity, okay, sentiment lexicon. And then for the other part, so in fact it turns out that we use the tweet sentiment. We basically, this is the only part we actually use graduate students. I mean, there are graduate students who take an information retrieval course I teach. They don't really owe us anything other than maybe at the very end of the semester I give them a grade. So I don't think I really influence them. But you have asked them to actually, and basically annotate some of the tweets. Okay, and one of the things we'll point out is the approach as a whole is able to use this very small amount of manually annotated tweets in an effective fashion. That's a big important issue. Okay, so there's another issue which is actually the term tweet sentiment really is regularizing the product of those 3 matrices rather than any one single matrix. There are interesting technical arguments in the paper as to why that's a better idea. Okay, I won't go into it, but you can read it. Okay, so that's your overall framework for the factorization. Okay, those of you who are missing some matrices, there is your actual the factorization. So what we are doing essentially is the tweet term matrix X is being essentially factorized into the GTSF matrices. Those are the 4 matrices I showed you, such that the G, T, S and F are close to G0, R0 and F0, which are the prior knowledges that we are computing. Okay, and the optimization is done to basically minimize this distance. Okay, so there is the recovery itself plus also the constraints that we be close to the prior knowledge. Okay, so that's your factorization framework. And as I said, R0 actually regularizes G times T times S, while the ETLDA regularizes G0, regularizes just G, and the sentiment lexicon regularizes F. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now, what I want to do is fast before going in and saying that yes, in fact, this factorization with this formulation can be done, which is actually we'll talk about in a minute. I want to tell you where we get this G0, R0, F0, because that's sort of the important, interesting aspect also of this work. Okay, for the G0, as I've been mentioning, I will use the ETLDA framework. Let me say a little about that. So here we are trying to, this itself is a big problem. Basically, you have a transcript, you have events, you need to be able to say which part of the event each of the tweets are referring to. And in doing so, you also are essentially doing segmentation. Okay, now what makes it hard, so the alignment, and this obviously because this is all unstructured text, this is text and these tweets are unstructured too, there is no, it's a hard problem to actually align these tweets to the segments. Furthermore, nobody told us where are the segments. Okay, so that's the interesting part. Okay, and another interesting problem is the tweets may well be talking about individual segments or may be talking about the entire event. Sometimes you will say, I'm sick and tired of politics while debate is going on. Is that because of a particular sentence in the 14th minute, or is just sick and tired of the entire debate? So some tweets actually could be about the entire event itself, and some might be about the segments which you have to find out as part of alignment. Okay, so this is sort of a joint activity, and the model we used, and this is actually this slide and the next slide are just about the IJCAI 2012 work. I'm mentioning it here because it's very important for what we're doing. So with the model we use is we'll assume a generative model where essentially the event transcript is basically produced by topic mixture. So you pick a topic mixture and then you generate a segment, and then you decide to change the topic mixture, you generate the next segment, you decide to change the topic mixture, and you generate the third segment, and so on. Yeah. So ETLDA considers basically this model, and the tweets too can generatively decide whether they are talking about a particular segment or about the entire event. Okay. Now we put this all in essentially a sort of an LDA framework, but this is a joint LDA framework. Looks reasonably formidable. I won't, thankfully, in this talk give you all the details, but I just want to say that this is how the alignment part is done for the prior. Okay, so what is this guy showing here? This is the event part, this is the tweet part for the generation in the generative model, and then this one essentially is deciding how the segments are being generated. This is deciding the topic mixtures that are being used for the segment. And in this particular case, on the tweet side, the tweet can decide whether it's going to be a segment-specific tweet or the entire event-specific tweet. And then, having decided that, if it decides that it's a segment-specific tweet, it has to pick which segment, and then the topic mixture. And basically, that's how the alignment is done. Okay, now the 2012 paper tells you how the parameters for this particular model are recovered from the data. So I won't go into it, but when this model's parameters are recovered, then in essence what you have is as part of that ETLDA work, we basically have the following segment to tweet alignment. Now the way the segment to tweet alignment goes is not by saying tweet 25 exactly goes to segment 15, but that it has higher probability of being in segment 15, little less of segment 14, and so on. Okay, so essentially for each tweet and for every segment there is a probability as to how probable is that tweet is actually referring to that segment. Remember again that the interesting part here is the segments themselves are generated automatically as part of the joint model. Okay. So, but by the end of this, you have a segment tweet model, and that can be used as a G0 for the matrix factorization framework that we use. Okay, so this is the one we are talking about. So now I told you how to get the G0 for that factorization framework. Now I'll get you quickly R0 and F0. For F0, which is basically term sentiment analysis, we just use a sentiment lexicon and then use the polarities from there. For R0, this is where we actually use students to look at a bunch of tweets and tell us whether they are positive or negative. So this really, after 3 prior knowledges, this is the only one that we are actually depending on the people. That's kind of nice. Okay, and I guess in terms of the complexity, the first one is the most complex. This is quite easy because there are information available for these sentimental experiments. Okay, so now we have all this. So now we actually have all the matrices, all the inputs to actually do this factorization. This is where actually Fei Wang, a co-author, comes in. We basically, it turns out that this is a hard factorization problem because we are essentially you're doing a 4 matrix factorization. And then also there is a coupling between all these GTSF. So getting optimal solutions for all the factors is hard. And however, we basically have an alternating framework where each of the matrices are separately updated, okay, using multiplicative rules. Basically, multiplicative updates, for those of you who aren't tracking matrix factorization framework but still came to this session, multiplicative update rules are the norm right now. And basically, we have the update rules, and there's also a theorem about the correctness of the update rules and the convergence in the paper. Okay. Again, there are more details on that, and also Fei is your man to ask questions on that. Okay, so we did some experiments. Now with all this, we essentially have the 4 factors. So if you, it should be obvious to you that if I have G, T, S, and F, I can answer all the questions I set myself up to do, right? As to which segments are positively being responded to, which are being negatively being responded to, which topics are positively being responded to, which are being negatively responded to. So I have all the information that I need to answer the questions I want. And now question of course is, do I do any better than anybody else who can also solve these problems? That's where there's a huge number of experiments in the paper. In fact, this is just a subset of them that we're going to talk a little about. So basically we'll show in this next couple of slides the classification performance of the sentiment, of the event segment, sentiment of the event topics, sentiment of the tweets themselves. Now this is probably the least interesting, but these two are quite important because they're about the joint nature of tweets and the transcript. And then we also want to, because I made such a huge deal about the prior knowledge, does this really help? I mean, if I just ignored all these G0, T0, G0, R0, F0, would I have done any better or just about the same? And so that is also evaluated. And finally, we evaluate how important is how the number of tweets that the postgraduate students annotate, how much is it making a difference? If you change that number, is the performance is going to be affected hugely, in which case it's very much sensitive to the training data. I do have time for questions, right? Yes. Okay, so I might go into some of that. So in terms of sentiment classification, essentially we compared it to 3 baseline methods. The details of all the baseline methods are in the paper, and the good thing to note, of course, is that the Saxent improves the approaches, the sentiment classification from the existing methods. Okay, otherwise I wouldn't have put this slide, I'm sure. The next one is about the event topics in that particular case too. In the case of topics, the question of course is, how do I decide what is a positive and negative topic? The way ETLDA works is, once you have segmentation, for each segmentation there is a topic mix. Each segment there is a topic mix. Now if a particular segment has 15 positive and 3 negative tweets, we'll assume that particular segment is positive. Okay, now if that segment has a topic mix T1, T5, T9, and so on, you'll assume that the top 5 topics are positively responded to. Because if in fact the segment is positive and its mix has high probability topics T1 to T5, then those are also considered positive topics. Okay, so that's what we did here, and again in this case, the ability to classify the topics is also better with respect to Saxent. Okay, this one has a large amount of information about a variety of ablation studies of removing F0, removing R0, removing G0, and combining them in different combinations and so on. And the takeaway lesson here is A, that in fact prior knowledge helps, and B, that in fact the combination of the prior knowledge is better than any subset of them, which is what we would hope. Okay. And then finally, this slide shows that they actually, we considered the size of the data set that people are evaluating, people are labeling, and that is less, and our work is robust to that. Okay, and then I'm going to end now. The conclusion basically is that it's a pretty ambitious task which involves essentially aligning as well as doing the sentiment analysis, and building up on some work that we did last year. We were able to actually support the full sentiment analysis with automated segmentation and alignment. Okay, and I will stop now. You can ask all the questions to Yu Heng and Fei Wang, and I'm done. Thank you.
We do have time for one or two questions.
Yes.
Maybe I missed it. Can you say what's the percentage of the manually labeled? Is it which matrix here?
Let's see.
Like the grass field where they provided colors.
Yeah, I think they were doing about 1,000 tweets.
Out of how many?
I don't remember. It's what I think 30,000 or something. Okay, but in this the robustness one, we actually saw how important that is. We considered less than 1,000 and more than 1,000 too. And the point is, with a little bit of human input, we seem to be doing quite well, and it doesn't increase significantly if you increase the number of examples, which actually can be seen as a good thing because then you're not that much dependent.
Okay, maybe one more while the next speaker sets up.